All right. Well, as I'm getting this going,
Yeah.
tell me about your work.
So I'm a paralegal for a law firm that does mainly real estate
Mm.
and corporate work. So it's a very small law firm in Kashmir, just
Oh,
three attorneys.
perfect.
Um, yeah, but it's good. I've been a paralegal for 28 years now.
Oh, right on. Okay. Yeah, you told me
So,
you were at a public hearing, and I was like, oh, wow, she's like really on it, and she's going to
oh
something already
yeah,
that we're about to talk about.
yeah. No, it was work related. We have court hearings for our cases that are in litigation, and sometimes they just
Mhm.
pop up at the last minute. So that's what I had.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you meeting with me, and it's always fun to meet with members and see what you're doing for Second Amendment advocacy, and or if you do anything,
Mhm.
and then how much you shoot and what brought you here, and your backstory is just really interesting for me. So, thank you for coming. Would you
Yes,
mind
you're welcome.
telling us a little bit about yourself? Like, what's your background with family and where you live, firearms, all that stuff?
Sure. So generally, I've been a lifelong Washington State resident. I spent the first 40 years of my life on the West Side. So I'm
You
now
feel
on
my
the,
pain.
yes, yes, I do, for sure. So I'm now over on the east side of the state. We are in Kashmir, which is a small town just outside of Wenatchee.
I love that.
Absolutely love it over here. I am the oldest of 10 kids. We were
Oh,
homeschooled. So
wow.
conservative background. My dad was a firearms instructor when I was really young. So I just remember going to the gun range with him. He let me drive the truck,
Yeah.
sitting on his lap when I was 5 and 6 on those back roads. And I've just always been really fascinated with firearms. And then having a dad that was knowledgeable and really wanted his girls to be empowered, he taught me how to shoot at a young age. And so firearms have just kind of always been part of my background.
Mhm.
Um, Currently, I am married and I have two children. I have a 19-year-old daughter,
Mhm.
and then I have a 10-year-old son.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
my daughter's not so much into the firearms, but my 10-year-old boy is. So we take him to the shooting range. My husband is a big 2A supporter. I feel like with politics and issues these days anymore, you almost have to just pick one because there's so many.
Mhm.
So we kind of have just decided like 2A is kind of our
Mhm.
thing. And I've always been really into the law and the Constitution and things like that. So that's just
Was
kind of
that
my
instilled in you
background.
from your parents?
It was, yeah, very
Mhm.
much so. I jokingly say that I was raised by feral people. And I mean that in the best way, very independent, freedom loving. My grandparents were that way. My parents are that way. Freedom is just really important. And 2A is a
Mhm.
big part of that.
It is. Everything hinges on that, really. Without that, what do we have?
Yeah.
There's no assurances that we can stay free. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That's so interesting because I mean, I was born and raised in Wenatchee, and
Oh,
so
yes.
I've always loved Central Washington, and I feel like I belong over there, and
Mhm.
life has just always pushed me towards the West Coast, and I've never
Okay.
really fit in. Which I find ways to pretend I fit in, but I just don't.
Sure.
And I mean, Wenatchee has come a long way as well. My parents always griped about it being, I don't know, not really what they were looking for. And they're very much freedom lovers too. And
Yeah.
so, and yet strangely, we didn't have many guns in the house growing up. My dad had a revolver that we would
Okay.
shoot on like New Year's, and it was really like this special thing. But it was so loud.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool, let's put it away.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, but
Um,
yeah, go
well, I
ahead.
think interestingly over on the coast, like my sisters, I have four sisters, they still live over there. There's a
Hmm.
lot more women over there maybe than you realize
Hmm.
that are like you.
Mm.
But I think that oftentimes we feel silenced because the other stuff is so loud.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the reason that I was drawn to WGOA is I
Hmm.
love the fact that you're a voice for women and firearms because it's
Yeah.
hard to find.
It feels like it's hard to find. Yeah. And
Mhm.
women are so agreeable and we're raised to be agreeable. The
Yes.
culture says be agreeable, be quiet. Don't be too much of yourself because then nobody
Yes.
will like you and you'll be an outcast and nobody
Yes.
wants that, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, women are being taught that we're not allowed to speak our truth and if this is how you feel, then it's that much harder.
Mhm.
So yeah, we do want to create that space where we are having these conversations and know that it's completely normal and healthy to be behind the Second Amendment.
For sure.
That's the kind of women that we want in this country, and I truly believe that women are the ones that can turn this around and can really be that powerful backing that the Second Amendment needs, because it's the women who are the shrill, the hysterical women on the other side of the coin here, who are being very loud,
Yes.
and they are making it feel like they're the like women all feel that way. Like if you have a women's group of any kind, they're going to call it woke. I'm like, no, 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 no.
Mm-mm. No.
No. Do you know what woke
Yeah.
means? Because don't you dare.
Exactly. Yes.
That's yeah.
No.
I mean, that's a bit of a knee jerk reaction for me because I hate that. But
Same. I do the same. No, I
yeah.
can relate. Yeah.
But yeah. Well, let's get into it a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, so how would your friends and family describe you? Are you someone who normally would be outspoken about what you believe in, or like what would they say about you?
The interesting thing to me is that my friends and family say that I'm outspoken. They say
Uh,
that I'm very strong. They say that I'm a leader. That is not how I feel about myself.
mm,
I feel like I'm much more, I'm not go with the flow, but I'm definitely not the loudest voice.
right.
Um, but I would say that I also, as I get older and more confident, right, as
Yeah.
women often do as we get older,
Yeah.
I tend to be the one that says out loud what everyone else is thinking.
Yeah.
And it gets me in a little bit of trouble sometimes. My coworkers like to like to say, "Did you just say that out loud?" Yes, I think I did.
Yeah.
uh, and even my sisters, we were together over the holidays, and I've gotten really interested in like really getting to know people, right? Like as we get older, like I don't want to talk about the weather. I want to know
Mhm.
how you are doing. And
Yeah.
so I would ask questions in the family setting, like, "Oh, why do you say that?" And they're like, "Oh, you can't ask that." Well, I
Right.
did.
Yeah. Oh, I can
So yeah.
relate so much to what you're saying. I feel like that's the same for me. And my husband will be like, you just said this thing." And he'll tell me later, "I can't believe you said that." And I'm like, "Said what?"
Right, like, it's good, I love it, I think it's really
Mm,
important for women that we do start asking those questions, and interestingly, my 19-year-old daughter has been a huge inspiration for me
mm,
because she, uh she's really taken on that idea of it's okay for me to take space as a woman.
mm.
She actually
Yeah.
started doing a thing when she was a sophomore in high school. Boys tend to sort of push through the hallways and the girls are expected to step aside, and
Uh,
she said, "I'm not moving." And so she actually had a couple instances where she would be walking down the hallway and one of the boys, and I love our boys, I'm not trying to put men down at all,
yeah.
but expected her to move aside and she just stood there. "I'm not moving. You're gonna have to go around me." And I was
Good
like,
for
"Good for you,
her.
girl."
He's like,
So
"Oh,
yeah,
whoops."
exactly. So yeah, I feel like she's been a huge inspiration to me too,
Mhm.
to be just who I am, like we all should
Yeah.
be.
Oh, that's great. Do you think that she'll someday be a concealed carrier?
We'll see. She talks
Mhm.
about it, and I think as a young woman who, she's getting into the nursing field, she works
Mm,
some
mhm.
different hours. I have a feeling she'll probably start going that way, just for safety reasons.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
definitely. Yeah,
yeah.
and I've always worked, graves and swing shifts, and even if you live in a safe place, like if you have
Mhm.
to drive anywhere, you very well could not be in a safe place as you're driving through, and all kinds of things happen on the road as well. So
For
even
sure,
just that part is worth having a firearm on you for some kind of protection. But then
for sure,
also, if you are in those dark parking lots, like, do you always have a buddy getting off at the same time that you can go with your car with? Will
yeah,
that matter because your buddy's also a tiny little girl like you?
yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, no, and, like, recently, my dad was in the hospital, I think I mentioned that to you, and my mom was having to go back to the garage at night, right? And my
Hmm.
mom is she's a strong, assertive woman, but, she said, "Well, I'll have the security man walk me to the car," and even that,
Hmm.
I don't feel comfortable with. It's like, "No, mom, you should be carrying," you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, and not in your purse too. There's
Yeah.
it's so tricky for women to carry correctly, right? And we're a
Mhm.
bit off topic. I know we're supposed to go down into the Second Amendment
That's okay.
um role here, but yeah, I just want to say where, it's so easy to get in this habit of carrying in your purse when it's super hard to access your firearm in your purse, much less,
Yeah,
talking about how insecure that is for an actual gun.
sure.
So if there's any way for you to make sure that it's on your person and accessible, that's really important before you even step out the door, before you approach your car.
Mhm.
And then even if that's not an option, if you're wearing scrubs and your holster game's not where it should be, and so
Mhm.
okay, your gun's in your bag. When you're walking to your car, put your hand on your gun. just
Right.
put your hand on it. Just hold. Don't pull it out. Come on.
Yeah.
But be safe to where if you need that, you're ready and have your
Yeah.
keys in hand. Get off your phone, things like that. But
Exactly. Yeah. No, so true.
hmm um, so I guess what drives you to speak on the importance of the Second Amendment? Is it just internally you feel like this is important, or did something ever happen to you where you felt like that was something that was important for you and your family?
I fortunately have never been in an incident where I actually needed to protect myself or my family with a firearm. I
Hmm.
think for me, it's probably more, it's more the importance of the Second Amendment to our American freedoms,
Hmm.
because without the Second Amendment, and I mean in its full and truest form, not I can't carry on a hospital, I can't carry on
Yeah.
school grounds, those
Right.
sorts of things. I think that's really what maintains our constitutional freedoms in this country, and
Hmm.
as that gets eroded, so do the rest of our freedoms. I also think it's important for us to remember that the founding fathers who actually wrote the Second Amendment, they didn't write it for hunting, they didn't write it for trap shooting. They wrote it because they knew that we needed to be able to protect ourselves from a tyrannical government, right? And nobody wants to admit that someday humans might need to rise up against their government. Like, I'm not at all saying, hey, we need to be violent. It's not like
Yeah.
that. But I do think that there does sometimes come a time and a place when that needs to happen. I mean, didn't I just see something about South Korea going under martial law recently?
I missed that one.
I think
Possibly.
I think I did. It could have, I always try to double check my sources, but I didn't double check this one. It came across my feed and I think I
Mm-hmm.
did. And I thought, I mean, gosh, what a perfect example.
Right.
Someone even mentioned, like, with the hurricane victims recently, how all of the building officials are not allowing people to put housing in there because they don't comply with current code. And someone commented in one of the threads, this might be a good reason for the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not, trying to foment violence, but I do think that that is why we have it, is so that we can take care of ourselves.
Yeah, you need to be prepared, right? And it's
Yeah.
a deterrent against, both foreign and domestic, right? You don't know what's
Yes.
coming. And so, but everybody in the world knows that there's a gun behind a lot of doors in this country. And so
Exactly.
that is a problem for them. That would be a problem
Yes.
for them if they were, considering invading or anything like that. But then, like you said,
Yes.
natural disasters, like the hurricane, power's out, internet's
Mhm.
out, looting starts, and
Mhm.
people get scared and desperate. And
Yep.
you just never know if something like that is going to head your way.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, and so you and I feel this way, and we both
Mm.
live in Washington. And William Kirk, who does the Washington Gun Law YouTube channel, you familiar with
Yeah,
him?
I am.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, he has some really great points, and he was saying that, and I'm not gonna be able to say this well, but he was saying that Washington just doesn't have the numbers to vote the way we want them to vote,
Okay.
and part of him saying that kind of made me feel better because I have felt so alienated in this state
Mhm.
and being like, why doesn't anybody have any common sense? No one is thinking past the headlines on the news on the main news outlets.
Mhm.
So and there's some smart people here too. It's not like we're all a bunch of dummies here. There's some really smart
Yeah.
people who are just not thinking through these things.
Mm.
And we keep on following California. Our votes keep on following California. And so I guess, do you have any input on that as far as, how many people are actually coming out to vote, and maybe it's just not a good voter turnout, or what it is that keeps us following California?
I do think voter turnout has a lot to do with it. I think that we have the numbers if people
Mm,
vote. The challenge is that we don't have any confidence in our voting system.
yeah.
And for good reason, right? Everyone feels like, well, the powers that be are just going to cheat to keep us the way that we are. But I
Hmm.
do think that when I look at the numbers and I see, like, Chelan County, only 12%
Hmm.
of voters turned out for the last primary election. Like,
That's it.
what? Yeah,
That's
yeah.
pathetic.
I was shocked, and I was like, "Well, then you should not be on Facebook, you should not be on Instagram complaining that things aren't going the way that you want them to,
Yeah.
because
Right.
you're not even trying."
Right.
And then I think the other challenge is education.
Hmm.
We have lots of hunters over here. Well, hunting rights aren't really being affected
Mhm.
And so people just aren't paying attention. When we went on our family camp out this year, I was talking to one of the cousins' husbands, right? They live over in Everett. He's a hunter. And I said, well, have you seen all the new regulations that are coming out about like handguns and things? Oh no, I had no idea.
Yeah,
No idea. People just don't know. And no one's going to the legislative website, like
right.
weirdos like me do every week or so to say, hey, what bill's been introduced?
Mhm.
And then of course the media is not, they're not
Right.
telling people because they don't. So I do think that education is a big piece of it, and I do think that we have to stay active, especially those of us on the East Side, freedom loving. We kind of just want to be left alone,
Mhm.
but we're not going to remain able to be left alone if we don't actually get active.
Well, we lost that luxury of pretending we can be left alone back in 2020. We just left that
Yes.
behind. You cannot bank
Yeah.
on that anymore. And
Yeah.
that was proven to us year after year of this total bullshit that kept happening, right? And
Hmm.
so, but the other thing I want to say is that based on this last presidential election, oh, your vote matters.
Oh,
Look
for
what we just
sure.
did,
Yes.
right? It
Yes.
matters. Yeah, we can make a
Yeah.
huge difference. And
Yes.
so to think that only 12% of Chelan County showed up to vote, I'm like, I'm kind of angry to hear that.
Yeah.
Come
Yeah,
on.
and that was the primary, right? So it wasn't the general. There was a better
Mhm.
turnout for the general. And then I think the other challenge too is Olympia is not really accessible for most of us.
Yeah.
Um, Washington it's a big state. You drive hours to get places. But I think that if more people, and I think if more women turned out
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
the hearings on gun control, I think legislators um, start to take notice.
I
You know,
hope
it's
so.
yeah, it's one thing when men show up, oh, big burly white man, there's sort of that presumption by the other side
Mhm.
of you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The patriarchy, I hate that word, but whatever. But when women show up and start talking about safety, and especially on the coast, my goodness, like the carjackings. I was reading, I think it was in the last Wagoa newsletter.
Yeah.
Um, I think you had a good article on that. Like, that's almost one a day.
Mhm.
That's a
It might be up
lot.
to that at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a lot, and I have friends over there that have had cars stolen in the last several
Mhm.
years. Fortunately, not carjackings, but I mean, it affects women. It really does affect women, and so I do
Right.
think that if women are getting more involved, I think maybe the legislature will start to take notice.
I think so too. And one of the other issues is that it is so fragmented and confusing of how do you even help out?
Yes.
Because, you have Gun Owners of America, the Silent Majority Foundation,
Mhm,
Women for Gun Rights, and there's quite a few, but they're
mhm.
all just kind of spread out, and all they do is send you an email about, hey, donate to our cause, donate to what we're doing. I'm like, I'm not sure I know what you do.
Right, yeah,
uh,
and I don't necessarily wanna just give money to an organization
mhm,
if I don't know that they're actually doing anything.
yeah.
That's the other thing that I think would be helpful is if we could do some training, for people that want to start participating in the hearings,
Hmm.
in the legislature. Back in the day, I worked for the Senate when I was 18.
Oh.
I worked for a couple of the committees, and it was really good education about the process, but it's
Hmm.
very different now. Since COVID, a lot of the testimony is remote.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know that. It makes it both more accessible and also less accessible, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think some training on how to get involved, just practical hands-on would probably be good.
I agree. Do you feel like it's the same in every state, or are there different processes in different states?
It's very different in every
Is it?
state. Yeah,
Okay.
the timeline is different, the process for the bills is different.
Mhm.
Um, I think I think I would say it's very different.
Mhm. I think that would also be a stumbling block for us, which we'll eventually get there with a little bit of time, but to have to go
Yeah.
state by state and be like, okay, this is what you got to do if you're in Washington versus Oregon versus Idaho. Um,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, and I think there you start with one and then just
Hmm.
slowly add. The
Yep.
organizations that I think are successful are the ones that don't take on too much at one time.
Interesting.
So one step at a time, and it feels like maybe you're going slower than you want to.
Hmm.
Um, but it's that slow and steady wins the race.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any organization that seems to be really making some headway and doing it right in Washington that you've noticed?
I really do like Silent Majority
Hmm.
Foundation. Pete is a great attorney. He's not, I don't think his focus is on current legislation so much as it
Hmm.
is working through the courts to have it overturned. And
Mhm.
I think he's a really good constitutional attorney. He is one of the ones that I really do support.
Mhm.
Um, Other organizations, though, I kind of feel like, I mean, even like the Republican Party, like the National Republican Party has pretty much given up on even supporting us here in Washington.
Mhm.
So, there's a lack of funding there. And some of the other gun organizations, I kind of feel like that's the same. Like at the national level, they're like, well, Washington's just going to do what California's going to do. So let's concentrate our time
Right.
and money elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
I'm
where I think
hearing
those, well, I
Mhm.
think that's where those of us who are still here, we really have to stand up.
I agree. Yeah, I think that's where it's really gonna make a difference to actually show up. And
Yes.
whether that's virtual or in person, that makes a
Hmm.
pretty big impact for them to actually see your face and you're not some crazy looking person. You're a normal,
Yeah.
well-adjusted female who is behind the Second Amendment. It makes a big difference. And I
Yes.
think women get into this, or I can speak for myself, where for a long time I thought, no one's listening to me. I don't
Hmm.
impact anybody. I don't make a difference. When in fact, a lot of people were watching me and they were
Yeah.
looking to see what I was going to do. And I feel like that was, I don't know, a lost opportunity for me for a long time.
Hmm.
And I'm just now starting to realize, like, no, no, people are going to listen, and people are just wanting someone to start. And
Yes.
so just
Yeah, and
start.
that's the scary part, right? Is being the one to take the first step. And I struggle with that too. I mean, there's a lot of times I don't speak up when I know I should
Hmm.
because nobody wants to be that first one. But
Hmm.
if nobody's going to be the first one, then it's never going to happen. So, I mean, we do. I like that John Wayne quote that courage is not the absence of fear, but it's saddling up for the ride anyway. To
Mm,
paraphrase,
yeah.
even though you're scared, and it's something I try to teach my boy, especially, like, we're all scared. It's hard to be the one to stand up, but courage is when you do it anyway.
Yeah, it is.
So,
And you do
yeah.
take that risk. I've definitely
Mhm.
silenced a room with what I've said. And
Sure,
it was just awkward and sucked. And I was like, oh, wrong thing to say, I guess. I guess.
I
But,
guess, but,
and also feeling confused at the same time, like, but was it? I don't think it was.
yeah, and you never know what someone is gonna do with it later.
Hmm.
They may the instant reaction may not be what you're hoping for, but they'll think
Yeah.
about it. People do think about the things that we say.
Yeah, I think they do too. Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. Um, so I think we've touched on this a bit, but what do you think we're missing as a nation that would make our Second Amendment stronger?
That's a tough one. I think a lot of it is education. I really do.
Mhm.
Because, the average person out there is thinking, there are police I can call to help me. I'm not in a dangerous neighborhood. Why do I need to support this right to carry? I don't want to carry. I'm
Yeah.
scared of guns. A lot of people I talk to, they're like, I don't want to. I'm scared of the
Yeah.
guns. But
Mhm.
that's where I think the education comes in, is what the Second Amendment truly is about. And it's
Right.
about protecting your First Amendment right. And you can agree or disagree with me, like, I don't care if we're on the same page, but you should be free to share what you want to share, and I
Mhm.
should be free to share what I want to share, but that only comes out of our ability to protect that right through the Second Amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And also, you don't have to carry. You don't have to
Right.
own a gun. You don't
Mhm,
have to do any of that.
mhm.
But you don't want to be that person who's getting attacked when your attacker's firearm is within your reach and you could defend yourself if you only knew how. Right?
So
You don't
true.
want to you don't want to be in a home invasion and your husband owns a gun but you don't know how to work it and he's laying there bleeding
Mhm.
and you don't know where the gun is, you don't know what to do with it, and you're we
Yes.
can't be this helpless. We can't be these sitting ducks thinking that nothing bad could ever happen to us. And I'm not saying something bad is going to happen to you,
Right.
but I mean, there's these ladies in West Seattle who they truly believe that their neighbors would come to their aid if there was a home invasion. Like
Oh,
your neighbors are
interesting.
sleeping.
Right.
First of all,
Yeah, first of all, and then, the whole idea too of like, well, I'll just call the police.
right.
It could take them 20 minutes to get there, and by that time it's too late.
Oh, absolutely. It'll take forever, especially in Seattle. It's a disaster.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, we have to take responsibility for our own safety. And that I believe every woman's baseline should be to know how a firearm works to the point where she's not
Mhm.
scared to pick it up and be able to shoot with it.
Yeah.
Even
And
if she's
actually,
not yeah.
I think you touch on a really good point, that responsibility to care for myself. I actually
Yeah.
do think that's a big part of what's missing in our country in general,
Mhm.
right? When something goes wrong, we lose our job, we go to unemployment. When something goes wrong, we can't feed ourselves, we go to the government and ask for food stamps. And I'm not saying that those aren't completely valid in certain circumstances,
Sure.
right? Like it's
Mhm.
nice to have some safety nets. But that whole idea of someone else will take care of me, someone else will put food on my plate, someone else will deliver Netflix to me. Like, I really do think that's a big part of what we're dealing with.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Especially, I hate to say it, but especially with women in this respect, where
Hmm.
we think that our man's going to take care of us,
Sure.
or our lady friend, or whoever,
Hmm.
where we feel like, well, of course he's the head of the house, let's say,
Hmm.
or whatever it is that you think. It's like, well, he also isn't around 100% of the time,
Yeah. And
and
there's nothing also that says, like, I was raised in a super conservative home. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. There was no expectation that I was going to go to college.
Mhm.
However, my dad, I love my dad so much. He raised very strong daughters, and he said, if you want to be a stay-at-home mom, that's wonderful, but you should have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I think I mean, I tell my daughter the same thing. Like, yeah, we all have hopes and dreams, but you can't assume that a man's going to take care of you.
Hmm.
He could get in a car wreck on the way home, and there you are with 3 kids, 3 mouths to feed. It just goes to that whole self-reliance kind of thing.
Yes, definitely. Well, and to go along with that, there's so much self empowerment that women are missing out
Mhm.
on because they assume, oh, I can just be a stay at home mom. I don't have to develop myself.
Mhm.
Your kids are going to grow up and leave the house if you're successful as a parent.
Yes, right?
And then where will you be? 20 years at least
Mhm.
of not developing your own interests,
Mhm.
not working on your mental health, on your body's health. And in the end, you're depressed and feel like you have nothing because you weren't working on any of that stuff. You were just so
Yeah,
focused on being a mom, which is not to take away from how important being a mom or stay-at-home moms are, anything like that.
for sure,
So
for
I don't want to be
sure.
misunderstood there, but
Yes.
I see a lot of very desperate housewife type of behavior where I
Mhm.
live, and they are lost without their children. And I think
Yeah.
that should feel like a red flag for most women. Like, you've got to pay attention to yourself as well. You're very important as an individual to be the best mom for your kids.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think, being a mom is, like, the most valuable thing that I do. I love my children, but I've also
Mhm.
always worked too. And I
Mhm.
recently asked my daughter, since she's technically an adult now, how do you feel about the fact that I worked? I wasn't at home all the time." And she said, what I really learned, Mom, was that you can be a whole person and still be like, to be a mom, you have to
Yeah.
develop yourself outside of just being a mom. Not that
Right.
it's not extremely valuable like you, I'm not trying to put that down. I think being a
Right.
mom is like it's the best thing we can do. But it's also good to feel empowered and be able to protect ourselves and our children and teach them and make ourselves just better overall.
Right. And your kids are watching you, especially your
Yes.
daughters. They're watching
Yes,
what
for
you're
sure.
doing. And you can tell
Mhm.
them all day long one thing, but if that's not what you do, they're going to learn what you do.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
so true.
So about public hearings,
Mhm.
you said you were just at one, but that was for your law firm, which is in real estate.
Yeah, and that was just a court hearing on a case. But
Okay.
so I have done some public hearings. I haven't done a lot of them recently.
Hmm.
And like I said, back in the day, they were all in person. So you would show up, and you can still show up to a lot of them in person. You show up in Olympia, you get on a list, they call you. You usually get 3 minutes or less
Hmm.
to share. They do a lot of it remotely now, and it's one of those things where it feels kind of scary and it feels like you're putting yourself out there. No one's going to throw rotten tomatoes at you. You're going to get up and you're going to share your thoughts on the legislation that's being proposed. For the most part, people aren't going to say anything, they're just listening. And so it's a chance to get up there and share your thoughts. And then when you walk away, you feel like $1,000,000. Like, look what I just did.
Hmm.
And so I think it's a super empowering thing to do, even if it feels very scary. I would
Hmm.
highly encourage everyone to take the chance to do it.
Hmm. And you can probably bring notes with you, right? You could just
Yes,
read
yeah.
your statement. That might be even advised, right?
Yes, I would
Mhm.
suggest writing it down and then reading it. Keep yourself on topic because there is generally a very short time limit. You start rambling, that's it, you're done.
Right. And then can they ask questions? And is it normal to have questions asked of you, or do they just let you say your piece and go?
They don't generally ask questions. I think there might be some situations where you could. be
Mhm.
asked questions, but for the most part, it's just your chance to say your 2 or 3 minutes and then get that on the record, and then
Mhm.
they move on to the next person.
Is there a limit on how many people can speak? I assume there is, right?
Yeah, the hearings are usually timed, so, depending on what the topic is, it can be an hour or 2 hours,
Mhm. So if you bring
and
100
yeah.
women to speak, you're probably not all gonna get to speak,
Right, exactly.
huh?
You'll get to lodge your opinion, in support or not, but,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
you won't
wouldn't
be able
that
to
be
say
the day
anything.
though? 100 women showing up and be like, "No, we
Yeah,
don't want this."
that would be amazing.
Right.
Uh,
We can all have goals.
yes.
Um, so would you be interested or willing to meet with other women in your area who are interested in supporting the same things?
Sure. Yeah, always open to that.
Mhm.
Uh, yeah, always. I have met some really cool women by just kind of putting myself out there like, "This is what I'm interested in. You wanna get together and talk?" Even with you, like,
Mhm.
I found your organization, reached out to you, "Let's have a conversation." It's been great.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I
Mhm,
think that's the best part about this whole thing. We'll go
mhm,
women for gun rights, like anyone who's any women's owned range, anything like that. It's just
mhm.
full of these powerful, amazing women who
Yeah.
are putting themselves out there because even if you're raised with this stuff, it still feels like you're going against the grain a little bit to
Yeah.
pursue firearms in any respect. And so yeah, it's just a great community of women to be involved with. It truly is a sisterhood.
Oh, yes, for sure. Yeah, I would also say too, and this is just kind of my perspective, but women like us who are into these things, we also tend to be pretty independent, right? You've got your few close friends. You're not out there just hanging out with a ton of people.
Right.
But don't be intimidated by that in other women. Like when I'm at the gun range, I always want to talk to other women. A lot of times they don't approach because you look like you're busy, you're independent, doing your own thing. But the more we put ourselves out there and just say, "Hey girl, how's it going?" The more connections we make.
Yeah, I agree. That reminds me
Yeah.
of I was just at the range a couple weeks, 2 weeks ago,
Mhm,
and we were going through this home defense course and walking through. They had a whole bunch of different bays and places where you could shoot or be in a class, whatever. It's really beautiful range up in Bellevue, and
uh-huh.
we came out of our class. We're walking through the hallway. Where you go past the rentals and the break room and all the stuff. And there was a group of women who must have been in some, I don't know, maybe Women on Target or something like that. And they came out of the classroom and the looks on their faces. I just wanted to give them all a hug because they all
Oh,
looked so miserable. Like, what did I just get myself into? I wish I hadn't
yeah.
come. This is horrible. You're like
That's
hearing the,
funny.
the shots echo in the different range bays, and they're like,
Oh,
oh my God, do I have to go do that now? I'm like, oh, you poor thing.
oh, honey, it's so much
Yeah,
fun.
it is. You
Yeah,
have to push past that class. You have to get past that day and know that it gets better after that.
that's very true.
Yeah.
I love it. That's funny.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I think we'll wrap this up in here in just a minute here.
okay.
Is there anything that you would like to say to women across America who are either armed or unarmed?
I think I would just say, be brave, be unashamed, and stay involved. Even, it's not a two-way issue, but school board meetings, your local city councils, those are really welcoming environments for people to start getting involved in um, in the laws that we deal with every day, right? Like we have
Right.
so many. We have local, we have state, we have federal. Um, to pick up and head to Washington, D.C. to testify on something for your first involvement is probably not realistic. It's probably going to be discouraging.
Yeah.
But start local, and start forging relationships with, like in our small town, I can call the superintendent and anytime, he's willing to take my phone call. Like start forging those relationships. You'll get more experience.
Yeah.
You'll get more knowledgeable, and it just builds from there.
I agree. And your local impact has an impact nationally. You don't realize it,
Yes.
but you do. And so, yeah,
Yes.
start right where you are is
Yeah.
good advice.
Exactly. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
Excellent. All right.
Oh,
Let me go ahead and stop the recording.
all right.
Sorry, that was a little